Yeah. Hey guys, this is Kip. I want to welcome you to Connection Rehab again this Sunday evening. And tonight we're going to talk about spiritual relationships. And we're going to have a special guest on tonight. And his name is Paul Silva. And he's been a friend of mine for a while, and I'll talk about him in just a second. But again, this episode tonight is going to be about spiritual relationships. And hi, Shirley, I'm glad you're here again. Thanks for always being one of our listeners that tunes in every week. I believe that everything that is natural also has a spiritual side to it. And it's no more evident, I don't think, than it is in the fight against addiction and alcoholism and in recovery. And Paul's here. Paul, I see you. I'll get to you. I'll add you on here in just a second, brother. But how often do we only fight what we see instead of what lies deep underneath, in our heart, in our soul, or in our spirit, the things that we cannot see. And if we continue to fight those things that we see on the surface or that we see on the outside, and use our own willpower, how often do we continue to struggle and eventually fail or relapse or even have chronic relapse? And I think a lot of that has to do with people not understanding spiritual relationships. And so I'm going to bring Paul in right now. Paul Silva from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And he is connecting with us right now. Will be with us in just a minute. Let's get him added on here. Hey, Paul, how's it going?
Good. How's it going, Kip?
It's going well. I'm gonna run over your bio real quick and let people know about you, and then give you a chance to expand on it. Okay?
No problem. Thank you.
All right, guys. My guest, Paul Silva. He is another one of the original recovery crew members that I met over 4 years ago when I started this online recovery effort, and one of the original guys I met, along with Mark and Chris Freeman and Dan Maurer, over 4 years ago. And Paul is a life coach who works with people in addiction recovery and also works with people in big life transitions. He himself transitioned just this past year from being a chef for 25 years in the hospitality industry, and he has 8 years of sobriety and has a passion for recovery and helping people. He has a blog. It's called Message in a Bottle. He's got 2 podcasts, one called The Buzzkill Pod and another one called Longing for the Spirit. And he has a book out also called Longing for the Spirit. And so I want to welcome from Toronto, Ontario, Canada, up north, my good friend Paul Silva. So Paul, just tell us more about you and Longing for the Spirit and what you're doing, what you got going on.
Yeah, thanks, Kip. Yeah, part of the OG crew, eh? Like it's
Yeah.
I said A. That's proof that I'm Canadian. It's I just want to say, it's been a pleasure, with having you and Mark and Dan and there's a few other people for sure that around that time who we're in the blogosphere, and and also there weren't a lot of guys, weren't a lot of men in the blog sphere. It's very female dominated, so it was nice also to just kind of have that little group together as well, just a bunch of men who were able to lean on one another and to talk shop and have this kind of talk. I mean, this is the kind of talk that we used to have regularly through the keyboard. Now we can do this, so this is really great. So
Right.
thanks for having me here. And like you mentioned, I transitioned this year, and I was a chef for over 25 years, and I've been in recovery for just over 8. And so obviously there was a lot of the chef hospitality industry is very kind to people like me who enjoyed the drink, and it's just because it's such a big part of it, obviously. But when I got a year, I'm not going to really go through my story, but let's just say I went out went to a party when I was 15. I didn't come back till I was 40. and a 25-year long temper tantrum, really. And you know, after I had a year of recovery, I was right. I was always writing, and I had sort of put on the back burner. And I thought, what do I want to do to write? And I thought, well, I'm doing this recovery thing because that's all I could think about. You know, that's the only thing I could do. There was everything I read and everything I just absorbed and ingested was recovery related. So I said, let me just write about that. So I started a blog, Message in a Bottle, and really it was just me. I wasn't following anyone. I wasn't looking at anyone. It was almost more for me. It was almost like an online diary, and then I started to connect with people, and that's sort of like probably when we started to connect a little bit further down the line. But it grew considerably, and from there, I took a break, and then I started a podcast, and that was Buzzkill, and so I started doing that, and then in somewhere in there, I thought, okay, I need to expand. I need to open this up because Spirit, and we'll be talking about Spirit, kind of tapping me on the shoulder, saying, let's readjust. Who's next? Where's the audience now? And so I was moved to write a book, and that one is Longing for the Spirit. And that was really a combination of blog posts, but I had to really rejig them and redo them, and I added lots of stories, added new posts. So it's a collection of essays, I call it, and on spirituality through the lens of recovery. There's some humor in there and a lot of pop culture references, and it's very much me.
Yeah.
It's just very much me. It's just my voice. And I remember I had an editor, and she was very young, and she's like, "Dude, will people understand?" I just keep the Tom Selleck reference. It's just people will know Magnum. Just don't worry, you don't. So I had to, that's the part I had to fight with him. So excuse me. And then I had the book, and that came out in November 2017. And I had gone back and forth with the podcast, and just recently I started the Longing for the Spirit podcast, and that's more about mindset, and there's some spirituality in there. And throughout that whole thing, I had transitioned to being a coach. And so I work, as you said, primarily, people in addiction recovery. So not necessarily people who are active. And I just want to make that clear. It's not to replace a program. I think if you're an active addiction, you need to have a program or some professional intervention, something. And that's not my thing. But once you get on your feet, and you know what it's like, Kip, you've got this whole new life, and you've had to get rid of the old one, you're kind of like, oh, okay, now what? I can't hang out with the same people I used to. I can't go to the places I used to go to. I can't do the things that I used to do. And so a lot of time it's the now what. And so I help people with that part. So it's in conjunction with whatever is keeping you and has kept you sober and connected. And so this is really to up level your sobriety. And so that's who I work with. And also, like you said, people in lots of major life transitions. So retirees, empty nesters, people jumping careers and all that. But really my focus now is on addiction recovery because, as you can hear, that is something that really speaks to me. And it just keeps coming back to me. Every time I try to retire the blog or the podcast, it's just like I unretire it because I just can't. It just keeps at me. Spirit keeps tapping me on the shoulder. So I just have to listen.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can completely relate to that last part there, where it just kind of keeps coming back at you. And, because I started my blog about, a little bit after you started yours, with just the Warriors on Purpose. And I kind of got away from that a little bit, thinking that I needed to go in another direction and reach a broader audience. And I'd moved past that. But I kept getting that tap on the shoulder too, and that nudge to just, that's your story, that's your message. Go where you're needed, for me. Christina just commented that she's happy that you unretired, and so am I. And I want to give a quick shout out to Paul too. When you guys hit this live and you're watching it, or when you get on, there'll be a pinned comment at the very top. It's got all Paul's links to his coaching and to his podcast and to his book. And so you'll have all that on there for you just to click right on it and get to that. And if you're watching, give us put a comment in the comment section about where you're from. Let's give you a shout out. And also, as you're listening to this and we go through it, if you've got a question for Paul, please put it in the comments. My wife is right here off screen, can't see her, but she's following along and she's writing down all the questions, and we'll keep those logged and get those to Paul at the very end. So, Paul, my first question to you as we get into this spiritual relationships is what does spirituality look like or mean to you?
That's a big question. Spirituality, it's, I mean, essentially, it's understanding that I am not the center of the universe, even though my ego will tell me likewise. It's knowing that there's something greater than myself. And, spirituality is also the seeking. And so I've always called myself a seeker. And it's seeking the experience, that connection to moment, to self, to others, to nature, to significant, to sacred. And so there's different ways of approaching, but there's knowing that there's something greater and that I can plug into that. Because as you know, trying to run on self-will, it didn't get me very far. It got me to a detox, right?
Right.
And so the spirituality really is, it's that divinity. It's knowing that there's that, um, whatever you want to call it, God, spirit, universal mind, divine consciousness, source, whatever it is, that there's something that extends from within and without. And it's hard to label necessarily. It's hard to put in a box. But we are part of it. It's this consciousness. And so it's something that for me it's something that is so important to me. And it's not necessarily the rituals. We talk a lot about rituals and probably talk a little bit about that. It's not so much the rituals themselves, it's the experience. It's bringing us to the experience of that connection. And
Yeah, that's
so
good.
spirituality, yeah, and so spirituality really is, it's all encompassing. It's just there. It's like the air we breathe. It's just there. And so it's trying to pinpoint, it's like trying to, capture smoke. You
Yeah.
can't. But it's there, and it's just knowing that it's available.
And that's good. And I think so many people, and I don't know with your if your experience is the same, but especially if they're confused with spirituality and faith and God or the universe or
Mhm.
however people can come to that understanding and however they seek it. But I think sometimes people get kind of they look at spirituality as religion,
Mhm.
and they get stuck in, or maybe they've been burned by religion or had a bad experience in a church or a synagogue or anything else that they may attend, and so they tend to take what those people that they experienced with or the wrong that they felt about that, and they put that into spirituality. And I think you made a really good point that it's not the rituals, it's grabbing what you find when you seek, that higher plane of existence.
Mhm.
Um, that next question I had for you, and I hope you're able to really grab a good one here. Like what Mark say is his nugget of wisdom, his grand slam. But as you begin to get into recovery and into a new life, was there an aha moment, or maybe there was a couple moments, a process that you really began to understand that spiritual side or unlock that door for you into what you seek for your spirituality?
Yeah, that's a great one. I don't know if I can compete with Mark's nugget of wisdom. I'll have to talk to Mark later and
Yeah.
exchange notes. There's a lot of moments, and what comes to mind is, when when you're in between, when I was actively drinking and between my vodka fugues, as I call them, there's a point that even the most hardened alcoholic has to take a break because the body is just getting beat up. And I remember
Right.
on those breaks and it last a couple of days, I would inexplicably at the time be drawn to religious texts or books on religion. I always found religion fascinating, even though I wasn't practicing. I just found it, just to study it was fascinating. So I gravitate towards those, and I even had gravitate toward like Quran or Bible or whatever was around. But I wasn't studying it. I was just putting my hands on the page. I was kind of just eyeballing it. I was just kind of in the space of the book. And I think what I realized later on is that I wasn't drawn to the words or the text itself. I was being drawn to the spirit. I was being drawn, I was being gently guided, I feel, towards that idea that there's something greater than myself. And so that experience, and this is looking back, this is connecting the dots looking back, was that I was being pulled towards that area because I didn't know how to approach it. I was in such a fog that I was just inexplicably drawn to these books. And so when that started to happen, when I got into recovery, that sort of those seeds, started to bloom. And I know that when I got into recovery, and it was really hard. Recovery early on is hell, is nightmarish. But I had that faith, the faith being, that unsubstantiated trust, or something that there's something out there that, again, that I can tap into, I can plug into. And so I used to hear things. I used to words that didn't come from me, a voice that wasn't mine, using words that I never used. And I'm like, where's that from? But I kind of knew where that was coming from. And it was coming from outside of me, but at the same time inside of me. And it would tell me, and there's in the book, I have a story called The Place Where I Met Myself. And that is, it was significant. It was about self-forgiveness, but I was drawn, the voicing. I was riding my bike from work, and it was late at night, and there was something, my voice saying, you need to park now. You need to sit. I'm like, okay. And so I had learned by that time, just if I hear that, I listen. And I went to the bench. There was a park, a little parkette, and um, just looking up in the moonlight, these two trees, the way they were touching and all. I go through it in the piece, but it was a voice just saying, you're off the hook. You're forgiven. And I just broke down right there in the middle of that park. And that was the first time I felt myself off the hook. And it was the first time that uh, I saw that in action. I felt that in action. And so it was one of those experiences. And I can't count how many. I can't tell you how many more of those kind of experiences I've had, where spirit all, and again, early on I was really struggling to get to meetings. I just never liked going to meetings. I had to do. I went to them because I had no choice. I did have a
Yeah.
choice, but I wanted to go. And I was struggling. I was on my bike. I was like, oh God, do I go? Do I go? What should I do? And I'm actually riding on my weights, and at any moment I'm just ready to turn around. And I was like, is this the right decision? Should I be? And out of the blue, I passed by this homeless person, and there was no one around me, and they just gave me a thumbs up. Like out of like, it was just weird. Like it's just, but it was like, oh, there's the sign. Okay, I guess. But there was so many of them, Kip.
Yeah.
Because when you're open to it and you're receptive, it's almost like you've got this pipeline, this channel that
Absolutely.
you have access. And drinking closed all that down. We're,
Right.
we're spiritual beings have an earthly experience, and that connection, it gets closed off for so many of us in so many ways, work and this and that and this. And once that pipeline opened up, it was nonstop. And that's what guided me, and still
Man,
does at times. Yeah.
that's just that's so powerful, and I hope people, and I know this is going to be, it's going to come across to the right people who need to hear this. But listen to you talk about it. It's just, you have such an eloquent way of putting it, to where I think everybody can understand it and and hear it. Because for me, mine's God, and I'm
Mhm.
very bold about that and what I do in my faith. But I also understand that sometimes, if people struggle with that, that can be a turnoff. And I really like how you're putting it out there, and it's just, that God moment of you, or that spiritual moment for you, getting off that bike and listening to that voice. And one thing I say every morning is, how's that go? Because I say it every morning and now I forget. I'm frozen.
That happens to me too.
Um, I hear what yeah. We'll move on. I can't remember that one.
So-
But I say it every morning of sitting will pull out my sheet. I hear God's voice and the voice of another I do not follow. There you go. Um,
mm,
but it's just, like you said, even in your active addiction and alcoholism, I mean, to me, it's just like, if that spiritual side of us, I think, is always at work. Um, and for me, I always thought, I used God as a genie in the bottle a lot, and then I always wondered where He was. Why was He letting all these things happen to me? And He wasn't. It was just my choices, and He was right beside
mm.
me all along. And my moment was a bit different, but I really love how you put that. Um, so as you kind of open up that pipeline, and I like the way you say that, because for me, um, I was even reading this morning that it's in the Gospel of Mark, but it just says, therefore, I say to you, the things that you pray, if you believe that you receive them, then you will have them. And it's just, and that's from the Bible, but you can say it different ways for people who have different beliefs. But I really like that. And so, as that pipeline was open for you, and you begin to receive spiritual things and see those spiritual moments all around you, really, um, how has that impacted your recovery? Because I know there's a lot of people that recover in different ways. But I know for me, that spiritual part is really just, you always say up level. And I say the same thing. It's really just
Mm.
upped my recovery to a different plane, really. I mean, so if you could share kind of how that spirituality and how that spiritual pipeline has impacted you in your recovery.
Yeah, that's a great question, Kip. And going back to what you said about, spirituality, religion, there's that, you know, as you talked about, there's the idea some people have gotten burned, so to speak, and they're seeing things through their own filter, and there's a lot of resistance um, with some folks to look at the spiritual component, and although coming from 12 step or spiritual, it's like the three-legged stool, mind, body, spirit. And, if one of those is off, it's like trying to sit on a stool with one of the legs a little less than the other. You're off centered. But, there's many paths up the mountain, and spirituality need not be part of someone's recovery. So I just want to put that out there that, this is just my experience. You're having your experience, and it is what works for us. And it doesn't religion doesn't enter it. And some people's spirituality can be bolstered by religion and vice versa. So there's that as well. So some people seek that spiritual attachment, or at least enhancement, through religion, and if it works, it works. Whatever works for you, then just keep doing it. So
Right.
but in terms of how spirituality is enhanced uh, my recovery, it's really, it's the day to day. It's the, when it's I used to take, I had bad knee. This has just come to me. And I used to take I think it was glucosamine sulfate or something like that, for I had cartilage damage in my knee. So I would just take it every day. I was just like, okay, whatever. And for a while, and after weeks or months, I thought, well, this isn't doing anything. I don't feel any different. Now, when I stopped taking it, that's when I felt my knee acting up, right? So it's not one of those things that hits you over the head necessarily every day, but it's a daily maintenance that when I notice it when I don't involve myself, or
Yeah.
I stand back from it.
Yeah,
And
that's good.
so, so when I notice spirit when I'm not facing it, or I turn from it. And so when I
Right.
turn from it, what I'm turning into is ego and pride, and just maybe into my head, into my paradigms, into my thoughts, which aren't always true. And when I am looking at that, then I'm living out of alignment. It's a very coachy thing to say. But it's, I don't feel off. I feel off. I don't feel centered, and I don't, and I'm just caught up here, and I'm spinning.
Right.
And that's when I know that I've stepped away from spirit, And so it's important for me to be anchored and to be centered and to be part of that maelstrom of spirit within and without. And so it's just noticeable when I'm out of it, because then I'm also looking for, then that gets into other habits, overeating or seeking attention from others, or just getting into things, looking from the external and trying to fill
Right.
that hole.
Yeah.
And when I go down that path, it doesn't serve me, and I get that. I mean, it's not every day I'm perfectly solid. I have to, there are things I have to do to maintain that connection, because it's just so easy for us to just to take off
You're
and
right.
go, oh, what's the
Absolutely.
point? I'm good now. It's been a while. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe, and then those start to inhibit, when really, when you get down to it, when you get down to brass tacks, it's like, well, that's the thinking that got me into my mess in the first place. And we all have that. They don't have to be an addiction or recovery, but the consequences for folks like you and I are much different, let's
Yeah.
say.
More severe, I
You
think.
know,
Yeah.
they can be more severe. Uh, so spirituality is critical for me, and it's my choice whether I tap into that or not. So
That's awesome. And man, it's so cool for us not to just be chatting over a keyboard, man. I just love hearing the actual words come out of you. It's just
I
and
know.
we all have little different viewpoints, and but when we hear each
Yeah.
other speak, it just enlightens us, so much more. And um, you were just talking about, you know, you really realize it when you step away from it, you turn your back on it, you aren't plugged into that pipeline. And that's exactly the same for me. And
Hmm.
I have things that I do that enrich and develop and strengthen, that spiritual part of my life, and I know you do too. But I really think that's a big key for people, because and that can be something that they can look for, especially when they're early on in developing that spiritual side of who they are. If
Hmm.
things start to get chaotic and out of whack, and they start looking to external sources in the world, and social media and their job, and promotion, and you know acceptance, or what's that word I'm looking for, validation from other people.
Hmm.
You realize that your focus has come off God, and or the spiritual. For me, it's God, but
Hmm.
it has come off that side and has gone to other things, and you can't
Hmm.
feed both. Um,
Yeah.
love the way
Yeah.
how you loved how you did that. But you mentioned that you have to do things to maintain your spiritual program, or your spirituality. So I wanted you to
Hmm.
share with everybody some things about that. But before, just because Christina is such a good friend of ours, um,
Yeah.
she had a question for you. And she
Okay.
said, she wanted to know if you grew up in a spiritual household, because you mentioned having faith, and she was wondering if it was innate within you, or was something that the Spirit guided you into.
That's a great question, Christina. No, I didn't. I didn't grow up in a household that was strongly, let's say, religious at all. But I think there was my mother definitely. There was spirit there. She did tap in, and her brother, my uncle, and I wrote about him in the book as well, Uncle Miguel, and he was very, Eastern philosophies, very very much tapped into that, tuned into that Zen Buddhist retreats. He taught, you know, martial arts. He was very 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 much in tune with that. And what's funny is that I've done a few guided meditations in terms of meeting my spirit guide, and it's been him, and he's come to mind, like, doing these things. So he has come to me, um, in slumber and in spirit and in waking moments. So I think that is probably where that may have been the source. And my mother to this day is still plugged in, but it wasn't overt. It wasn't necessarily taught, but I think there was always something there.
Yeah, and I wanted to share that with you real quick because I know that we both, she's a good friend of us, ours, so
Yeah,
I
yeah.
wanted to throw that to you. Um, and again, I want to stress to people that are watching this before we get into that last question that I have for you, that if you have a question about what you've heard Paul speak about and about spirituality and his path to that, um, please put it in the comments. Um, my wife's right here writing them down for me so I can give them to Paul and he can answer those for you. But I again, I believe for me, I think spirituality and the spiritual side of recovery is just key um, to maintaining a strong and solid recovery, to really a thriving life. And you have to do things to maintain that, just like you do any program, just like you do, um, you know, a diet and our eating and
Hmm.
or exercise. I know that you're into the exercise thing. I run vicariously through you quite a bit. Um, so I watched those posts that you come up with that you just finished your run. I'm like, okay, I did that too. Um, but I know on that spin I need to do better. I have to walk. I'm too way out of shape to run, but we have to maintain and develop and strengthen those and have routines. And so I wanted to throw that question to you. How do you maintain and strengthen your relationship with the spiritual?
Yeah, there's a few things I've done since, I think probably since day one of recovery. I started a prayer life that I don't think I've ever missed a day. And that starts upon awakening. Um, if you're in 12 step, you can get your bingo blotters out here. Step 11, we'll talk about some of that upon awakening and such. But for me, it's I have a few prayers upon awakening. Also, upon awakening, I ask intuition, like what would you have me do today? And it's just a question because you're just in that alpha wave. The mind, the brain is in that alpha wave where you're. I think you're more tapped into spirit and you're more susceptible. So I ask basically what would you have me do today, or what's today all about, and listen to that. But then I have a couple of prayers, and it changes. I used to do like some native prayers or some just a bit of everything, but essentially just a few things to kind of get me going, prayer wise. So it's asking and also praying for others and praying, all these things. So it's prayer life for sure. Um, the other thing is meditation. And so they say, in prayer we ask, in meditation we hear and receive. So it's, again, that's the big pipeline for me. That's the number one. That's where I hear. That's where I have the conversations. That's where I hear things. That's where I actually have a journal and I write down stuff that I hear in my meditation, or else I'll forget them. It's like a dream. It's like being in a dream. And when you're in it, it's like, oh, this is so awesome, And then like
Yeah.
2 minutes later, I'm like, what happened? I can't remember. So I write these down. And again, what I was saying earlier, I know it's spirit because it's using words I don't even have in my vocabulary or rarely have used. So meditation for me is very important. And talking about running, I do run a lot. Uh, Things will come to me then. I think for all of us at some, we, shower thoughts, right? When we're kind of mindless, sometimes in a car or walk or something, when we're doing something kind of mindless, we let that's a nice little portal. That's a nice little opening, a nice little window for spirit to come in, because we're not commandeering our brain and mind with a million racing thoughts. But definitely meditation, and that can be 8 minutes, 10 minutes, just in stillness. And if I don't have time for that in the morning, uh, I'll make sure at some point that I can sit for even a minute or two, especially if I'm waiting for something, and then just take deep breaths and let that go. Um, Other things that I do, Kip, we talk about this, especially in early recovery, surrender. And so, in a constant state of surrender, and again, it's my choice. If when I don't surrender, I pay the consequences for it. But it's surrendering my right to be my need to be right, surrendering my need to control people, surrendering my need um, to just be the center of the universe. And so when I can surrender that and just let things be, it takes the pressure off, for one thing, and
Right.
and then I can turn inward, and then I can focus on the deeper power, higher power, as opposed to coming at it from a lower power. And
Right.
so when I can surrender, and this could be micro surrenders throughout the day, it doesn't have to be this massive play. It can be just small surrenders, like, what am I getting out of this? How important is it that I need to be right at this moment? How important is it that I, whatever it is with my kids or whatever it is in relationship? And so that helps me, because then that takes away the minutia and all that noise, and so then I can focus on what, you know thinking about what is in charge and what power there is out there. And then the last thing is, and this may not be a day-to-day thing, but again, forgiveness, and
Yeah.
self forgiveness for me is big. Like I can pick up that whip easily and just lash myself. Is self forgiveness. And so the more I can do that, uh, let myself off the hook there, uh, I'm better for it. And people around me are better because I'm in a place of that surrender, of serenity, of calm, and I'm not at the affect of my thoughts and the lies that fear and self-doubt and lack of confidence will give me. So I think having those in place, um, are important to me, especially prayer, meditation, and the mind body spirit connection. And that's why I run a lot too. you know
Do
um,
you do you with your spirituality, do you incorporate anything that kind of helps you have a sense of community or accountability, or besides just you and your connection with that spirituality that you seek? And I'm not
um
in a,
you know
like some people, like for me, it would be like going to church or being in some type
mhm.
of um, group, a men's group that we're getting together and talk about those kind of things. Do you do anything like that for yourself or with that side or?
Yeah, I don't, not quite like that. Nothing organized or nothing. I think there are moments I might have discussions with friends about things about in that nature, but
Right.
nothing regular or nothing. But that's important too. That's actually a great point, because having community, especially a like-minded community, or like-spirited community, is
Right.
great, because when lifting each other up, when we're not entirely crisp, if you will, on things.
Right.
I do lean on, I do have a lot of online support, um, people that I can reach out. So I do have it, but it's not necessarily face to face. So there is
Right.
that, but that's a wonderful point. Absolutely, having community and being able to lean on one another, being able to lift one another, being able to, um, have different perspective. You talked about that earlier, right? We all
Right.
have a different way of looking at things and a different, and there might be something that, you know, you might dismiss easily, but when you think about it and hear it in a certain way, you're like, whoa, it's mind blowing. So
Yeah.
it's that's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to touch on something that just kind of what you through what you've said, and as I do that, I'm going to ask you to kind of to recap something here in just a minute with that.
Hmm.
When it refers to when people get confused with the spirituality or spiritual versus religion, um, and I hope the people that have watched this or watching it live and that watching on replay, um, I hope that they can hear what you say. If they watch anything that I do, they hear what I say, and
Hmm.
instead of honing in on the differences between you and I, um, or maybe the way that we believe or practice or whatever, see all the similarities because that's what I'm hearing. I mean, you
Hmm.
talked when I asked you about how you maintained and strengthened your spiritual side. I mean, the prayer and meditation thing. That's how I start every single morning for me, and mine looks a little bit different than what yours does,
Hmm.
but in essence, it's the same thing. It's just we just seek it a little bit different. Um, the exercise thing is key. And like I said, I run vicariously through you, but I walk each morning. That's my exercise, and I do
That's
about
great.
probably I don't. It's 3K, so I don't know how many miles that is, but and that's a great time for me to even go deeper into my meditation and to hear from God and what He has for me. And because, and as and people will think, well, God doesn't come down and say, Kip, I need you to do this. That's not the voice I hear.
Yeah.
It's more of a nudging in my spirit, and I get these
Hmm.
ideas and things are just I'm asking for, if I have a live coming up or I have a piece I'm writing or if I've got a practice or a tournament coming up or, the new school year starting, what would you have me do to impact these people? And these ideas just like pop up. And I know that they're not from me.
Yeah.
Because some of them,
Yeah.
I don't think I'm bright enough to come up with that in a second. It's just some of us like I would never even thought of that on my own.
Yeah.
And so, I get that same thing where when I'm driving, I turn the radio off and it's just time for me to have a conversation um, with God, and I talk to God like I would talk to you.
Hmm.
I think
Hmm.
people get confused with that too. They think they've got to have some sort of ritualistic routine to make it effective, and where that spiritual side, where God, He just wants you to have that relationship with Him, or whoever
Hmm.
that spiritual thing is for you. I mean, it's just nurturing that. And then I love the surrender and the forgiveness part too, um, because I think those are things when we're not surrendering and we're not living in forgiveness, then especially those things that were so damaging to us in our addiction with our
Yeah.
ego and pride and selfishness. I mean, they just run rampant, like crazy. Um, so, hey, Brittany, I'm glad you tuned in. Brittany Shelton's with us.
I know.
Did you
I
see
was just
that?
laughing at her. I was just laughing
She
at
runs
that. Yeah.
vicariously through you too. So, and she intermittently fasts through you. Well, Brittany, you can
Yes.
intermittently fast through me too, because we do that. We've been doing it for like 2 months now, and I've dropped 22
Oh yeah.
pounds this summer so far. So, I'm loving it.
Whoa.
And it was hard at
Wow.
first because I'm like, sick. We were on like a 16-hour
Yeah. Me too.
time,
I'm
and
doing
I'm
that
just
one.
like,
Yeah.
at first I was like, oh my god, I need to go get the pizza buffet. But now it's just some hard boiled eggs, a salad, some
Yeah.
healthy dinner, and it's all good. Um, but anyway, that kind of what I wanted you to retouch on was that I've noticed as we've gone through these questions and we've had a chance to talk with one another and interact that our paths are so much more similar to our spirituality um, than they are different.
Mm.
And I think sometimes that people again get confused with that religion and spirituality, and they see all the differences, and they hone in on the few differences, and instead of seeing all the similarities. And so I kind of wanted you just to kind of retouch And it's kind of what you were saying in the very beginning, um, about your definition of spirituality, and that it's not religion, it's not ritual, it's not those things. And if you just kind of retouch on that for me, if you
Hmm.
could.
Yeah, and what you said is bang on in terms of the looking for the similarities. And this is something again from recovery that we were told early on is when we hear people talking about their stories, instead of looking at how they look and how they sound and maybe what socioeconomic area or part they're from or how they represent, is listening to the words behind the words, right? In between the words, the
Right.
silences. What are they saying? And and that's very much like this. And it's easy to get drawn into dogma and all sorts of stuff like that.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's easy to also see things through a certain filter, especially if, like you said, we've had an experience through a religious figure. It could have been like that, the nun that slapped you on the wrist with the belt or something. You know, they had that back when I was younger. And so, but it's something. It can be. You hear so many people who are turned off just on something simple as that, right? And it can be traumatic. And so they've turned away from that whole religious thing, where and in terms of spirituality, it's again, it's not the ritualistic, you know, against the dogma and just this, very laid out thing that we need to do. On this day you do this, and at this time you do this, and you fast here, and
Right.
whatever it is, and you'll wear this. And spirituality just it sheds all that, and it brings it down to an essence, a core that is equal to everyone who invites it and seeks it. And so when you are able to grasp it and open and get receptive to it, and to understand that when I look in the mirror, that's not the whole thing. There's something that created this. There's something out there. This is again for those who believe. But this thing facing me in the mirror, 20 pounds overweight, that ain't the whole enchilada, baby. Like there's something
Yeah.
more out there. And so for me, spirituality is tapping into that whatever. And again, divine consciousness, universal mind, source, God, higher power, whatever it is you want to name it. And again, it's just the name. The name is just a it's just a name. It's not it's a label, but we can't put a
Right.
label on that. You can't put God in a box. You can't put any of that on any pedestal or anything like that. It just is.
Right.
It just is, and we're an experience of that. We're a portion of that universal mind, and expressed through us and our bodies and our earth suits. And so spirituality is it's very individual. It's how you see things, it's how you experience them. And it's nothing to do necessarily, like I said, with a certain book or anything like that. And and I say that respectfully, of course, because that can augment one another. Because that,
Right.
you know, the ritual, however way you want to do it, if it's just a personal ritual or in a community ritual or organized ritual, if that is the vehicle to plug in to get attached to that, then that's what works. And so
Yeah.
all of us just have our ways up that mountain, but the mountain is still the mountain, and
Right.
that's just there.
That's a good way to. There's your nugget right there. That's a good one.
The
Um,
long nugget.
um, I just, man, it's just been amazing sitting here hearing you talk, because those similarities just keep popping out to me. And you just
Mm-hmm.
said that, this is open to everyone,
Mm-hmm.
and all you have to do is receive it. And I believe the exact same way. My vehicle may be a little different, but through my spiritual walk and journey that I've been on, and God for me is who I seek.
Mm-hmm.
But I love the church that I attend for this reason. One of the things that really caught my attention early on was that they said that spirituality or God is not religion. God is just
Mm-hmm.
God. And you said, you can't put God in a box. And I just think that was so key. And I just hope the people that watch this can hear your words and see what you're saying and grasp that the little bit higher level of what you're trying to say, and get past the religion or the ritual or anything else, and just see that freedom that we can experience when we seek that spiritual side. Because for me, I think one thing in early recovery, especially, and I did grow up in a um, I did grow up in a religious household, and my dad was a minister.
Mm,
And so I had the foundational tools for that dogma and that, um, just that doctrine that had been ingrained into me. Um, and through recovery, though, it's allowed me to reconnect to that side. But I've been able to see that it's not that doctrine, it's not that dogma, it's not the religion or the rituals. It's not because I go to a building that has four walls that calls it church on a Sunday or a Wednesday. It's because I seek that in everything that I do. And
mm,
then when I'm doing that, it gives back to me when I receive it. And, you know, I just, I just wanted people to hear you speak tonight so they could see that spirituality that is so important, I think, in recovery, to really thriving in a life of recovery and not just battling the drug or the drink. Um,
mm, mm,
doesn't have to be necessarily what they've seen on TV or what they experienced with their parents or what they saw on social media or through somebody's comments. And that it's their path that they can seek, but it's the same mountain we're all going up. And I love the way you put that. um, you guys that are watching, I know a lot of people have been with us the whole time, Wendy and Christina and Brittany. You guys have any other questions for Paul, for him? I'll let you throw those in the comments real quick if you do. But Paul, I'm going to give you a chance while they're doing that. I'm going to give you a chance to kind of just replug what you're doing with the podcast and the blog, and your book. And also, though, I also want you to tell everybody what you're doing with the recovery coaching stuff too.
Oh, get the plug stuff. I love it.
Yeah.
Thanks. But you know, Kip, what you said there, I thought was really, really well stated too. Like just because you go to a certain building at a certain time, that's not like, okay, I'm on. Here we go. I'm gonna get me some fixins on this. It's how you live your life.
Right.
It's
Absolutely.
it's the other 23 hours you're not in that building. That
Right.
is a reflection of where you are.
Right.
And so it's living. It's not so much the word, it's the spirit, right? And that's something that I
Right.
know is stated. I went to Catholic schools all my life, so I do remember there's a lot of that. So I do recall a lot of that. But you know, the book, I mean, it's Longing for the Spirit. It's blocking my head right now. That is available Amazon. If you go on to, I know you're going to put the links up there, so I won't go through the wwws. But certainly there's one for the book, and there's also one for the podcast. The podcast is fairly new. You know, I've got, speaking of interviews, I've got some people. I had, you know, just quickly, I was trying to figure out who I wanted to get on, and it was in meditation. My first question is like, oh, who do I get? And a name out of nowhere, like no one I would have thought of in a million years consciously came, and I've got him coming on. So that's going to be really cool. And it's also not only listening to spirit, but taking action. So, so I've got that coming on. Buzzkill, you know, I had retired, it's back. And now I've got a few interviews lined up. So I'm really excited about that. Really, now that I'm doing the recovery coaching and working with addiction recovery, it's all, you know, it just feels like all of this is coming together. The book, the
Yeah.
coaching, you know, all the years of sponsoring in 12 step and this and that, it's all coming together. And so, you know, even I just the other day again in meditation, I just thought of the sequel to this book. So I've got the name already. So I'm looking towards that. And in terms of the coaching, you know, it's uh, again looking at people who are not who aren't, you know, active right now. You know, I do have some clients who are deciding or what their relationship with alcohol is, not that, but daily drinkers or binge drinkers or users. Um, you know, I work with people like that as well. But really, it's those people who have got a bit of time on their feet and answering, trying to figure out the answer, what now? Because we have to abandon our old ways if we want to live a healthy life. So it's really about up leveling, and I've got a group coaching program starting probably around September that will tackle that in a very you know, through a series of worksheets and Q&As and videos and all that. So it's going to be very formatted, and so that's going to come up. But right now it's a one-on-one. So I really work with people, what is it they're looking for, and how to access more of themselves, and how to change the way that they look at things, and the script of their life. And, you know, through recovery. And, you know, people, there's something about shorthand. People that have been in recovery, we just know each other. We can say a few things and we're like, oh, I get it. And
Right.
so there's something about that that people are attracted to in doing the coaching. So it's something I love. And I also work with people in life transitions. That's also stuff I love as well, but definitely more focusing on the recovery. So I have, the website is up there for the also the coaching. And I think that's it for the plugs. I think I got a lot of things going on, but it's fun,
Yeah.
and it speaks to me, and I'm passionate about it, and I love it, and I love seeing how people change. We've seen it in recovery. We see it. I see it in coaching. We just see it as, you know, you doing these lives. You know, you're touching a lot of
Yeah.
people. You're reaching people. You're saying what needs to be said, probably at the time they need to hear it, even though they don't know it yet. And that's all spirit, man. It's all that
Yeah.
shizzle. Yeah.
Completely agree, man. It's just, and it's like just where I came up with the Warriors on Purpose thing. You know, it's just
Yeah.
that passion and purpose. You know, when I know what my purpose is, I can plug those passions in, and it just comes up. And I love what Christina just said, planting seeds. You
Planting
had mentioned that
seeds. There you
earlier.
go. Good
Yeah, because
gardener.
I think that's how God works with me, and I know that spiritually that's kind of how it works. And there's a lot of references to that in the
Yeah.
things that I read. But um, when you guys are watching this again, be sure and check the pinned comment at the very top. It's going to have all of Paul's links to his coaching, his podcast, his blog, his book. And Paul, I have been honored to have you on here. Um, I think it's been amazing the way you have delivered your ideas and your path and your what you've learned through your recovery with the spiritual and your spirituality. And again, it's really helped me to see that, you know, we are so much more similar than we are
Mm-hmm.
different. And I love how you brought that up, that being in that church building just for 1 hour, or even being in an AA meeting for 1 hour, um, what we do outside of that and how we live our lives that's the spirituality. It's
Mm-hmm.
not the ritual. It's not checking the box off that I went to church. That doesn't do me any good unless what I hear there and what I receive there I put into practice. And I just love the way you have of connecting with people. Brittany says you seem happy, connected, and empowered, and good for you. Thank you both for dedicating your time and life to service. And yeah, Brittany's going to be on here soon. Um,
Yeah.
we're,
No
yeah,
way.
yeah.
Awesome.
I asked her last week, and she
Brittany.
said yeah. So she's
Darn
in
right.
down the road, coming up here in a couple weeks. But just
Nice.
to end this up, um, again, guys, just your relationship with the spiritual is not religion. It's not realistic. It isn't mystical necessarily. It's our heart, our soul, the very essence of who we are. And sometimes I think if we would realize the battle is not the drink or the drug, um, that, you know, the battle is in our spirit, in our soul, in our heart, trying to figure out where that hurt, where that resentment, where that lack of forgiveness, where that trauma, you know, where it's damaged us. When we seek that inside of ourselves, and like you said a lot on this live, that it just wasn't about you, that there was something bigger than just that person that you saw in the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, I think that will start to move people from just being clean and sober to actually thriving in a life of recovery and not just surviving. I
Yeah.
just think that is just so so paramount. And it's just kind of, I want to kind of end with, and Wendy, we love that you're here. Yeah, I can see your comments, and
Wendy,
yeah,
love
you
ya,
know what?
love ya,
She
Wendy.
brightens she brightens my day just for
Oh,
the fact of the pictures that she puts on social media when she
I
walks.
know, I
That's
know.
just like
Aren't they amazing?
it's a I know, just amazing. She needs to market and sell those suckers or something.
She's a
Um,
light. Let me tell you, she is
yeah,
a
but
light.
it's just I wanted to end with this, and to me, life is kind of like a staircase, and our spiritual journey can be the same. When you go downstairs, it's easy, and
Hmm.
but that just takes you down, and that's kind of like when we turn away from
Oh.
that spiritual part of who we are, and we start seeking the world's ways and our own desires and our own will. That's the easy way out, and that's kind of like going down the stairs, and it's easy. And
Mm.
going up the stairs is more difficult. Like probably our parents would say we walked to school both ways, uphill in the snow with no shoes. Um, but going uphill and going up the stairs is difficult. It's going up that mountain. It's not like we're taking the same path down into a crater. We're taking the
Hmm.
same path up a mountain, and although that staircase going up is a little bit more difficult, that also is what elevates us and rewards us, and that's kind of what our spiritual journey is like. And so it just takes a little bit of effort, and that you'll find that whatever I think your spiritual source is, it meets you where you are, um, and you'll find it on the way and not in the way. So I just wanted to close with that. And Paul, I just want to thank you again for being with me. I hope that we can do this again. I'm sure that
Yeah,
we can come up with some more topics on faith and spirituality, and because a lot of my thing is faith. Um,
yeah,
so I'm
yeah.
just big on that. So it's just what you believe is what you become, and what you speak is what you become, and what you think and take in your heart is what you become. So again, I just want to thank you for being with me, guys. If you're watching, I just want to thank you for watching and staying with us, Wendy and Brittany, and some of you other guys that have kind of stayed with us the whole time. Thank you so much, and we'll be back next Sunday with another episode. And until then, keep seeking your spiritual journey. Know that it's not a ritual. Know that it's not a religion. And look at the people around you and see the similarities and not the differences. And so we will check out with that. Thanks a lot, Paul.
Thank you, Kip. Beautifully
All right.
said.
Bye bye.
Thank you.